Hello and thank you for joining us. You're listening to a We Do Talk with David Jaques. Welcome to this week's We Do Talk. What better place to do it from than the We Do headquarters? And I have a guest with me today who's joining me from Scotland. I have Tom Russell. So Tom, thanks for coming over and big welcome. Thanks for joining me today.
Thank you, David. It's a pleasure to be part of We Do.
So Tom has a very distinct reputation that he has to live up to. He has a background as a disc jockey, a radio presenter, and on the way to that career, he also served in the UK military in the parachute regiment, and also ran and operated his chain of record stores in Scotland. But the reputation he has is as the Godfather of Rock. It must be quite a reputation to have to live up to. How do you do that?
With difficulty. It wasn't a term that I came up with. It was a listener would write in with their 3 favourite rock songs for us to play. And at random, that listener would be picked out, but that listener would become the Godfather of Rock for the day. But gradually, people started saying I was the Godfather of Rock. And then when I brought my book out, it was a case of what we're going to call the book. And someone suggested, why don't you call it the Godfather of Rock? And I felt a wee bit uncomfortable with it. It's been a little bit pretentious saying that I am the Godfather of Rock, and I would never say that, but it's just a little tag that stuck with me over the years.
It's got a ring to it, that's for sure.
Yes. The other one that it nearly was, the title of the book was nearly The Beard of Doom, which I personally I quite liked. And that again was one of the other presenters used to refer to me as the Beard of Doom.
Ah, okay. So what came first? Was it the record stores or the radio career?
It was actually the record shops, maybe early 70s. I opened a small record shop, and it was an exciting time for record shops and music. I mean, the early 70s, the music at that time was just fantastic. And to be able to spend 8-10 hours a day listening to whatever you wanted all day long was exciting. The shop did okay for a couple of years. It was in a small town, small record shop, small town. I was a bit nervous to open in the big city centre of Glasgow because of the competition. The first shop did okay. I opened a second shop a couple of years later, then a third, then a fourth, and everything was fine. And then Sod's Law kicked in. I had a fire, I had a flood, I had a robbery. And then the supermarket started selling music, and that was the beginning of the end.
Yeah.
When supermarkets started stocking the music. Not that they were any cheaper than my shops, but it was the convenience.
Yeah.
The convenience of a customer and his wife being in a supermarket, and they pick up the butcher meat and the milk and the sugar and the bread, and oh, there's that CD. But in the middle of that, I started working in the radio as well.
Yeah. The record shops that you had, I would imagine you probably started out with the vinyl, the LPs and the singles, and then you transitioned to cassettes and eventually to CDs.
Yes.
And this is all before the days of streaming.
Way before the internet hadn't been invented. MTV hadn't been invented. Yeah. So you used to, for example, lunchtime, Monday to Friday, you would get the local high school kids coming in and just hanging about the shop, not buying anything, pretending that they were browsing through the records and looking at these wonderful sleeves. And sometimes the really brave ones would come up to the counter and say, could I maybe hear a little bit of this sleeve? The record, I've never heard of the band, but the sleeve is wonderful. Could I maybe hear it? And you'd say, yes, certainly. And you'd put it on and play them a bit of it. They wouldn't buy it. But maybe a month later or a week later, they would come in with their pocket money and they would buy it. Yeah. So it was a wonderful time.
Yeah. Well, I am dating myself, but I do remember going to buy the new release on the single, the vinyl single. But I didn't do that very often because I had an older sister, so I was able to use hers when she wasn't home, so that worked really well. So how did that transition to radio? How did you get into the radio world?
It was strange. But in those days, record companies would promote a new artist, or indeed an established artist with a new album out, they would promote that artist by taking them on a tour of the big cities in the UK. And I've no doubt in America and all over the world it happened in a similar fashion. They would take a suite or a room in a hotel, and they would invite the local radio stations, the local newspapers, very important, local TV stations, and local record shop owners and staff. And they would invite them along to this hotel for the evening. They would provide free drink and food.
Nice.
And all you had to do in return was sit for an hour and listen to the new LP by the artist. Or indeed, sometimes the artist would be confident enough to play live. They'd do a little acoustic set. And I would be invited to these regularly as a guy who had a record shop or two. And I would get to meet people from the radio stations, press, television, etc. And I got into conversation one time with this fellow, Richard Park his name was. He was the boss at Radio Clyde, which was the Glasgow radio station. And I used to have the confidence of, in the conversation, say to Richard Park, "Why do you never play any rock music?" And Richard would say, "Oh, no demand. Nobody wants to hear it.
It'll never take off."
No, it'll never happen. And I would say, "But Richard, I get record shops, and I fully accept that the majority of my sales in the record shops are pop music. Probably 70% of my sales, 75%. But there's a small percentage that like classical music, country music, jazz music, rock music. I'm not saying that rock is as popular as pop music, but there is a lot of people who actually like that." And Richard would dismiss this as, "Oh, no, not interested." And then one day, after a few months, totally out of the blue, the phone went, "Hi, Richard Park here. Is that Tom?" "Yes, I'm just wondering, I've been thinking about what we've been talking about. Would you like to come in to the local radio station that I run and have a chat?" So I did. Went in, and we had a blether. It's an old Scottish word. And he said, I've been thinking about what you've been saying about some of these bands that I've never heard of, that I don't think have any future, but I've been thinking maybe it might be worth a try. And would you be interested in doing a radio show for me once a week? We have a slot available on a Friday night at midnight. It's a dead slot. Nobody listens to the radio, but I'd give you a couple of hours and you can play all these weird and wonderful bands that I've never heard of that you keep talking about. You know, like Led Zeppelin and Creedence Clearwater Revival and Pink Floyd and Deep Purple. Never heard of them, most of them, and most of them nobody will ever hear about. Strangely enough, here we are 40 odd years later. However, my answer was, I don't have any real experience as a radio presenter. I wouldn't know where to start. They said, "Don't worry about it. We'll have you in a few nights and I'll train you in what to do," which I did, went in a few weeks. And then he said after a couple of weeks, "Okay, you start next Friday. We'll give you a six week trial. See how you go on."
So you did 6 weeks worth of the radio show at midnight on a Friday, and you got an audience, I'm assuming, and what happened after the 6 weeks?
Nobody said anything. There wasn't a phone call to say, "Tom, you've done okay, we'll give you another 6 weeks," or "Thank you, Tom, it was good fun, but
Yeah.
that's it." So I just went in again on week 7. Nobody said anything. And I did another show, put my invoice in, got paid, went in week 8, nobody said anything. And I kept doing that for, I think it was maybe 22 years. I was at Radio Clyde doing the show on a Friday night.
So it was a long 6 weeks.
It was.
Yeah.
It was.
Yeah. Well, did you continue that Friday night slot, or did they move you to an earlier time?
Towards the end, a new boss had taken over who moved it to a Sunday afternoon, but that was only maybe the last couple of years.
Yeah.
My memory's a little bit hazy about that. And then I got a phone call from a chap called Jay Crawford, and he phoned up and said, Tom, how do you fancy coming in for a chat? I've got something you might be interested in. And he said, I've been hired by the Guardian newspaper. We're launching a radio station in Glasgow, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, all that music that you like. And we want you to be the leading presenter, and you would be on air rather than once a week for a couple of hours. You'd be on air 6 days a week doing daytime, plus you'll continue with your Friday night show as well. And I thought I'd died and gone to heaven. And I was so pleased. I made the cardinal mistake of not saying how much. I just said, yes, where do I sign? And then ventures continued for another few years.
Yeah. And during that time, you got to interview some pretty prominent musicians.
I was very fortunate. Again, if a record company had a straightforward pop artist, they would take them around the radio stations and do interviews. But when it came to a rock artist, in the early days, they only had Tommy Vance on Radio 1. And Tommy, with his producer Tony Wilson, they didn't have an interview every week. The record companies discovered fairly quickly that there was myself, and there was one or two others starting to dot up in the UK. And they found that guy up in Glasgow, he's got a good audience. If we phone him up, if we've got an album by Ozzy Osbourne or Kiss or Led Zeppelin or Aerosmith or whatever, he'll be quite happy to do an interview. So it was a little tick for the record companies, we're doing a bit of promotion. And I was quite fortunate on getting to interview just about everyone over the 40 odd years that I've been doing it, which is, I've been very lucky.
Yeah. Is there any one of those interviews that really stands out as a memorable experience for you?
It would sound so arrogant and boastful saying, oh yes, I interviewed him and this, Harvard and all that stuff. So I'm reticent to do that. I'll tell you two quick ones. They're just the ones that spring into my mind.
Right.
Guns N' Roses, first time they played the UK. Appetite for Destruction had just been released, which was the debut full-length album. And they were still relatively unknown, but there was a buzz. There was a little bit of a buzz about it amongst people who knew there was this new American band coming out of California, and the lead guitarist actually came from England, from Stoke-on-Trent in England originally, but they were coming over to play their first couple of shows, and they were playing in a place called the Marquee. So again, I was really fortunate because there wasn't that many. There was some journalists into rock music, some radio presenters into rock music, but we were a fairly small band. So I would tend to get a phone call from the record company saying, Tom, we've got this new American band coming over to play at the Marquee. How do you fancy coming down? We'll put you up in a hotel, we'll take you to see the band and do an interview with them. Yeah. So it was a wonderful night. And you could just see the absolute class, the excitement, the great playing, the terrific songs, just everything, the image, everything about them. Next morning to do the interview, and they showed me into a hotel room, and there was Axl Rose, the singer, Slash, the guitarist, and Duff McKagan, the bass player. Do you remember a boombox, they used to call it? Yeah. With two big speakers and the cassette. This boombox sitting on the coffee table, and it's playing music. And the album they were playing was by a band called Nazareth. And Nazareth were a Scottish rock band who had quite a bit of success, late 60s, 70s. and right through the 80s and 90s. And the introductions are done. This is Tom, he's come down from Glasgow, Scotland. This is Slash, Axel, and pleased to meet you. And Axel, when he heard my accent, he said, "Gee man, are you Scottish?" And I said, "I'm from Glasgow." "You recognise this?" I said, "It's Nazareth that's playing." "Do you know Nazareth?" And I said, yeah. Met them a couple of times. They're from Dunfermline in Scotland. Wow, and you could see the three of them get all excited. And Axel said, "If we come over and do a UK tour, is there any possibility if we do a show in Scotland, could you maybe get us to meet Nazareth?" And I says, aye, I've got Dan McCafferty's phone number. I could phone him and,
Yeah.
Wow. So that was all excited, and of course the interview was fantastic.
Yeah.
So that was one story. Another one from the early days. Record company approached me and said, "We've got this new American band we've signed, and we're quite excited about it. Can we send you up a white label of the debut album?" I said, "Yes, of course, no problem." Maybe a week, 2 weeks later, I can't remember, they said, "This band are actually now coming over to the UK to do a tour next month. What did you think of the White Label album?" I said, "I think it's terrific. Yes, I'd be happy to play them on my show." Well, they're coming over to the UK next month, and they're actually going to be supporting Kiss. The first night of the tour is in Scotland. Would you be interested in doing an interview? Yes, of course, certainly. So the arrangement was for 3 o'clock in the afternoon, they would come into the radio station and we would pre-record the interview for me to broadcast on the Friday. I went into the radio station, the band arrived in just a little minibus. 3 members of the band came in, and they were like, "Wow, we're in a radio station in the UK." We went through into the studio area and we recorded a basic first time in the UK interview. Got on great with them. The 3 of them were so nice. We finished the interview, and then they sat for maybe another 10, 15 minutes. And then the driver, roadie, knocked on the studio door and said, "Listen, we'll need to get going. We've got a sound check to do in half an hour." So we go to the front door, and there'd been a little bit of snow, maybe half an inch, centimetre of snow. But thank yous and good nights, and "Are you coming to the show?" "Yes, I'm coming to the show." "Right, great, we'll maybe have a beer afterwards." "Oh, that'd be lovely." They got out and they got into the minibus, and they couldn't get out of the car park. The driver, who was from California, had obviously never driven in snow. So he's, the wheels are spinning round, and he's skidding about all over the place. Yeah. And I'm standing at the door of the radio station with my producer, John, and we're watching this. And after 3 or 4 minutes, we're going to have to go over and help. So we went over to the car park, and so the 3 guys from the band get out. I told the driver to put it into first gear, and just very gently, don't accelerate, just nice and gently. And the 5 of us, the 3 guys from the band, John McCallum, the producer, and myself, are pushing the car. We're gradually getting it out of the car park, and the driver just got a little bit excited and accelerated a little bit too much. So all the snow and the slush is coming up, covering Dave Bryant, Richie Sambora, and John Bon Jovi. The 3 guys from the band are covered in snow and sleet. We finally get into the minibus and off they went. Yeah. to do their sound check.
Yeah.
And for a number of years after that, obviously Bon Jovi have gone on to have a pretty successful career, and I've been fortunate enough to interview them a number of times. And every time from then till now, every time I meet them, they always give me a good slagging for being the guy that got them covered in snow and ice. They remember.
Well, of course, today that will be something you take a little video with your phone, you post it out on Instagram, and it will go viral.
Exactly. I didn't even have a camera to take a photograph of it.
Yeah. So great experiences that you had there. And so Tom, what are you doing today? Is music still a part of your life? Are you doing anything?
Very much so. I'm still working on a radio station in Glasgow. It's a station called the Max. So I'm still doing a couple of shows on that, which I still thoroughly enjoy. I've always tried very hard to encourage new bands and new music as well. So I still play the occasional classic track from years gone by, because there's young people who have perhaps never heard Back in Black before. But I still like to discover new bands and help promote new bands. I'm doing some work for We Do, as you know, which I'm thoroughly enjoying. And even at my stage in life, I still enjoy going to a rock concert, and still a little bit of life left in the old dog, I'd like to think.
I'm sure there's a lot of life left in you. And when did your book come out?
About 4 years ago now. It's one of these things, for many, many years, people used to say to me, "Oh, Tom, you've got so many great stories, you should write a book." And I always tended to have the same answer, mañana. It was always one day,
Right.
I'll get around to it. But to be honest, I didn't know how to. I didn't know where to start. And then I've done, for the past probably 10 years, I've done a little bit of film work. And this lad says to me, "You're Tom Russell, aren't you?" I said, "Yes." He said, "Do you know, I've listened to you on the radio for years." And we got into conversation, just a couple of guys having a chat. He said, "Do you know, you should write a book." Another pound.
1,000,001.
And I said, "Yeah, I'd love to, but to be honest, I wouldn't know where to start writing a book. I'd really love to." He said, "You should team up with somebody who's done it, who knows the ropes." Yeah, where do I find someone like that? And he said, "Well, I've done it. I've had 3 books published." Oh. Exchanged phone numbers. The following week he phoned me. We met for a curry. Paul Murdoch, his name was. Probably still is. And over the curry, we chatted about it, and he said, "I think we could do something. I could help you write it. I could introduce you to publishers." And cut a long story short, we'll put it together over the next few months. I was a bit reticent for the title, and over our conversations, Paul suggested 2 titles. One was Tom Russell, The Beard of Doom, and the other one was Tom Russell, The Godfather of Rock. I was more tempted towards The Beard of Doom one because, as I mentioned earlier, The Godfather of Rock part, it's a little bit...
Yeah, it's a little self-indulgent in some ways.
That's
right?
the expression I'm looking for.
Yeah.
So what we did was we used social media. And I'm fortunate to have a few followers on Facebook and Twitter, and we'll put it out. I'm thinking about releasing a book. Please help.
What's your vote? Yeah.
What's your vote?
Yeah.
Will we call it this or that? And I think it was maybe 80% came back as The Godfather of Rock.
Yeah. So Tom, you have a career as a record store owner, a radio presenter, an author. Is there anything new on the horizon, or is that still to be determined?
I think I'm quite excited about We Do, working with We Do, and talking to different people. The majority of my interviews over my 40-year career, 40-odd in the radio, have been musical. But I've also interviewed sports people, film stars, interviewed politicians. I'm happy to continue interviewing musicians and bands, but it'd be interesting to expand the other side a little bit. So I'm quite looking forward to seeing how far we can go with We Do.
Great. Well, one of the things that we're going to do for the next We Do talk is that we're going to ask you to interview me, because I'm normally the host of these. Well, I'm always the host of these, and nobody's actually interviewed me. So if you're up for that, we'll do that for the next episode.
Looking forward to the challenge.
Great. Tom, one last thing I'm going to ask you for any aspiring musician, young person that's looking for a musical career. If you had to give them one piece of advice, what would it be?
Probably be nice to the people on your way up. And on your way back down, hopefully 20, 30, 40 years further on, you'll meet them again on your way down, and they'll be nice to you on your way back down. Because you see so many people on their way up, more so on the pop side rather than the rock side. The occasional person isn't very nice on the way up, but the vast majority of them, in my experience, have been nice. But in the pop scene, so many people on their way up when they're selling millions of albums and first-class Concorde flights, etc. If you're not nice to people, and then you hit a peak and maybe something happens and your career starts plummeting, all the people that you were not very nice to are quite happy to give you a little kick on the way back down. Yeah. So be nice to people. You don't need to be arrogant. You don't need to be unpleasant. Be nice to people.
But not just that doesn't apply just to the entertainment world. That applies to really any business. And I've worked mostly with startups in Silicon Valley, and my advice to people is always don't burn the bridge. Unless somebody has really badly wronged you and done something really malicious against you, which very rarely happens. But if you don't take the time to at least acknowledge the contacts, if somebody's been even moderately helpful to you, take the time to thank them, take the time to reciprocate, keep in touch with people. If you're rising up and you have a great success in whatever business it is, you might not always be in that direction. Things change. Things can come back down. Mm-hmm. You're in your second business. You want to go back to some of the same people that might have helped you the first time around. You want them to help you again. Mm-hmm. So maintain your contacts, keep in touch with people, and communicate well.
Tell you, very quick story. First record shop. I had a bank account with the local bank that Mum and Dad banked with. I didn't really have much to do with the bank until I decided I would like to open my first shop. I had a little bit in savings, but nowhere near enough. So, being totally inexperienced in the 70s in business, I had no business training. I just fancied the idea of opening a record shop. Where did I get the money? So I went to my local bank that I'd banked with for a few years and asked for an appointment with the manager. Was given an appointment, came back in the next day. I think I maybe even put a jacket and shirt and tie on, which is not my normal attire. And I went in, and the experience was horrific. I was scarred for life by this experience. I was shown into this office where the bank manager was sitting behind a desk. I wasn't even offered a seat. I had to stand there. I gave my pitch. He listened. Halfway through my pitch, the door opened and a young lady came in with a tray and a pot of tea and a cup and 2 biscuits. He poured his tea, ate his 2 biscuits, as I stood there, wasn't even offered a cup of tea. A horrific experience. At the end of my pitch, he said, and I can't remember the exact figures, I was maybe looking in the 70s for a loan of £3,000. I maybe had £500 in my bank account. My dad Mum and Dad offered me a couple of £100 to top it up. And he said, so you want to start a business? It's going to cost £3,000. You've no idea if it'll be a success. And you're saying you have 700. I'm sorry, Mr. Russell, you're wasting my time. Come back when you've got maybe 50% of what you need. And I went out of that my tail between my legs, totally deflated. The next day I went back thinking, you know, it's a small town, but it's not mega money. And then I was just standing there and I looked, and there was a branch of the same bank, the Royal Bank of Scotland, across the road in the corner. I wonder, walked into this other bank and said, I don't suppose there's any chance of an appointment with the manager, is there? Oh, a very pleasant young lady. Wait and I'll see. She came out and said, he's available just now if you want to go in. Oh, so I went in. Totally different atmosphere, totally different reception. Have a seat. What can I do for you? He listened carefully, asked some questions, and he said, it sounds quite exciting. Can you leave it with me for a couple of days and come back and see me on whatever day it was? Certainly. Oh. So I went home feeling a little bit more encouraged, not convinced that I was going to get the loan, but feeling a little bit more encouraged. Went back 2 days later, and he said, I've talked to all my staff at the bank, and they all think what a fabulous idea of having a record shop in the town. I talked to some of the other business owners who are my clients, and every single one of them said, what a fantastic idea, a record shop. Music's really happening in the 70s, it would be a great addition to the town. So, you're on.
Amazing.
And my career, and the career just went from there.
Yeah. Now, what the first manager actually said to you, I mean, the message of what he's saying is that my bank doesn't feel that you have enough experience or money already to be able to start the business. That's not an unreasonable response.
Correct.
But the method of delivery is just totally off. And unfortunately, I do believe that customer service today is more attuned to the customer because, back in the 70s, you were an inconvenience to your bank manager that day. You were an inconvenience by even being a customer. But fortunately, even banks that used to be big old dinosaurs have changed a lot and have gone with the development of the world and have reinvented themselves. So great story.
But I often think if I hadn't gone back to the town, looked and turned around and saw that other bank and not had the oomph to go over and speak to that second bank manager, I wonder how my career path would have gone. I'm sure I'd still have done okay. I would have done something. But
you never know. Living with it's a funny thing to think of sometimes. The what if I hadn't done this, what would have happened there? How would it have worked differently? We'll never know.
Anyone watching this, thinking about going self-employed, it's not for everyone. It's not the easiest way to make a living. But if you've got the burning ambition inside, you've got a good idea, give it a try.
Yeah. Well, that's one of the things that we do is all about, is supporting the freelancer, supporting the independent worker, supporting the small business owner, because they're an up-and-coming part of the workforce, they're a bigger part of the workforce, and they're going to get even bigger. Corporate work is certainly not dead, but I think a lot of people are starting to have that realization of, I have a gift, I have a talent, I have an idea, I can do something with it, and I'm going to. Thank you, Tom. Great to have you with us today, sharing your thoughts and a stellar career that you've had, and I know you're going to have a lot of fun with it in the future and also doing your work with We Do. So thanks for being here.
Thank you, David.
Yeah. Thanks everybody for watching. I hope you enjoyed this week's talk, and if you would like to leave comments below, please do. Subscribe to our channel. Until next time, be well, be happy, and see you soon. We upload a We Do talk every week, so if you enjoyed this one, please subscribe and leave your comments below.